Welcome everyone. I'm Elizabeth DeCorby. I'm a second-year engineering physics student at the University of Alberta. Tonight I will be moderating the technology and research for electrical and computer engineering. That's the name of the panel. We will have 5 incredible University of Alberta alumni here to share their professional experience that they've had after their degree. They have some incredibly diverse experiences, but equally inspiring paths that they followed after their degrees at the university. So we'll begin our panel with the panelists briefly introducing themselves, and then we'll begin asking them questions. Please leave your questions for our panelists in the chat, and my lovely assistant Annette will share those questions throughout the session. In case we do end early, I would like to remind you that there is a networking function as part of this program and an expo with some information on various engineering groups. So unless there are any questions on the format, I would like to jump right in to the introductions. Here, I'll just check the chat quickly. It looks like we have a great number of viewers now. So maybe Sean might as well, if you wouldn't mind starting us off. Our first question is, if you could just tell us a bit about your University of Alberta experience and describe your current job, and I guess just anything else that we should know about you before starting into the panel.
Okay, so I was from Alberta, so I stayed in Alberta for a very long time. I graduated from the engineering physics program at the University of Alberta in 2011, and then I stayed for another 6 years doing a graduate degree. I got my PhD, and then I moved and continued doing schooling. So my professional experience is none, and I've been avoiding the question of what to do after you get a degree continuously. What you do is you get another degree, and you just keep going down the road, and it all works out fine. Trust me, it's completely good. And yeah, so I've kind of gone the academic role, and my experience and knowledge is mostly about being a postdoc, what higher academics looks like, and kind of what the current prospects are in that domain.
Awesome. Is there any fun fact we should know about you?
I really like road biking, so that's I guess it's kind of fun, huh?
Fantastic.
Yeah, not bad, right?
Yeah, so I look forward to hearing more about your academic path. I guess we'll move on to Forrest, if that's, I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
Just let us know again your experience at the university and what you're doing currently.
Sure. So I graduated from computer engineering back in 2008 with the software option. Sort of a long and windy journey, but about just over 10 years ago now, started a company named Jobber. It's we're in the swag for a little free promo, yeah, it's a software company. It took a lot of grinding. For the first few years, it was just me and my partner eating ramen and bumming desks off other people's offices who would let us stay there. And now we're 270 people, and actually just announced another big $76 million funding round, and we hope to add another couple hundred this year. So I don't really know what I do there. I'm still waiting for somebody to tell me what my job is, but it's been a great journey.
Well, that sounds fantastic. I actually recognized the name of your company. I think I attended a coding workshop that was held in your office a few years back. So that was a cool connection that I drew. So I'm glad to hear that it's still working out so successfully.
Yeah. Knock on wood, so far so good.
Awesome. Todd, would you like to introduce yourself now?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Todd Carson. I graduated from electrical engineering 2006, and I think the time there was probably pretty run of the mill. I remember the capstone project not working when we needed to demo it at the last day, and I remember eating about 1,000 chicken wings, maybe per year or month. I don't know. So probably pretty typical. I don't know. My career, all the jobs I've had have been pretty pretty diverse, and the range has given me a heck of a lot of opportunities. Some of them kind of just appeared on my lap, and other ones I've had to, pry open with a crowbar. And the job I have now doesn't fit on, one business card. There's not a business card. There's not a one title that works with it. I do a few things, and I think this flexibility or freedom came from a couple of years ago. I was able to I had a successful exit from a consulting company that I started, co-founded, and we grew it like crazy. Had that exit in 2019, and so since then I've been able to split my time between working with some other local startups at their early stages, sharing some business knowledge. Maybe it's formalized as an advisor or a mentor, some as an investor, and also working with a consulting firm in town here called ReNu Engineering. I'm their electrical engineer, and ReNu is kind of a boutique, high performance building mechanical design firm for those. If you think of certifications like LEED or Passive House or Net Zero, that kind of high performance building. So I'm splitting my time a few different ways, a few different business cards.
But it sounds like you are definitely kind of splitting your degree in a bunch of different directions. That's awesome to hear. Darren, I'd love to hear your background now and what you're doing now.
Okay, great. I'm Darren O'Reilly, graduated in electrical engineering in 2001. And I guess my experience back then, even though it's been pretty much close to 20 years now, was pretty heavily involved with the autonomous robotic vehicle project, which I saw on the expo is still a big thing. So pretty wild to see that still going. And, I've kind of got a very diverse background. I started out, actually, I moved to Seattle area after I graduated. I worked for an engineering startup company, and I was dealing with autonomous aerial vehicles for a company that actually eventually got bought by Boeing for military applications. From there, spent 15 years working for Caterpillar, the heavy equipment company, and did everything there from electrohydraulic controls to transmission development in the oil and gas field, to actually doing a 3-year stint in Australia supporting custom machine development for non-competitive OEMs. So was able to see the world with that. And then from that, spent 3 years working for a semiconductor processing equipment company that made like chemical processing tools. And most recently, for almost the last year, I've been working for SP Industries, which make equipment for the pharmaceutical industry. So actually I've been, I run a relatively large engineering team that is involved in the development of large freeze dryers and vial fill finish equipment, which one interesting fact is actually we were heavily involved with expanding the capacity of a large pharma company's ability to make COVID tests. And actually, whole facility had to get tested every single week for about 16 weeks throughout the summer. So it's been interesting just throughout these times that just kind of how your career shifts. But I've done everything from, controls development to business development to, engineering management. And, I've been all over the place. So I can kind of give an idea of, the different options that are out there career-wise. So.
Like, you have a lot of varied experience, and I'm sure you'll prove to be a very valuable resource on this panel for all the students that have questions. So finally, Prashant, let me know if that's the right pronunciation. If you'd like to share what your experience was at the University of Alberta and what you're doing currently.
Sure. You can hear me okay, I hope. So I'm Prashant. I'm originally from Mississauga. I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Waterloo in nanotechnology engineering. It actually is a very similar program to the EngPhys program at the U of A. I moved to Edmonton in 2011, where I met my fellow panelist, Sean. We were actually in the same research group, so I moved to Edmonton to join the grad group there and did a degree in nanophotonics. Specifically, ended up doing my PhD, from which I graduated in 2018. So Sean and I ended up taking quite different paths from grad school. He went the more academic route. I went into industry. I'm currently in Portland, Oregon. I work for Intel. So we're basically in technology and research and development for the next generation of semiconductor processors. So I hope Sean and I can kind of show you that even if you do end up doing the same thing, there are, a few different options in terms of the way you can go and what you can do with what you end up learning in school. But yeah, excited to be here, and I'm interested in all the varied experience I hear on this panel.
So I have two more questions that are more specific to the university experience, just for you to recall back fondly on those days. I don't have anyone in specific that I wanted to ask about this, so just speak up if it is something you want to speak on. So the first question is, how did your time at the U of A prepare you for your engineering career?
I can take a stab at it to start. I think when I graduated, I don't know if I could have said that I was prepared. I know I was certainly riding the high from graduating and getting a shiny ring and a nice degree. But I don't know if I, other than that kind of like ego, I don't think I could have said what I was ready for or not. But looking back, like I remember those. I'm sure other people had exams like this where you sit down and it's, one question per page, and you look at the first question and it's, like I have no idea what the answer is. I don't even know where to start. So I turn the page over and another question that I have no idea where to start. And I have flashbacks to those exams more than once throughout my jobs in my career, because it seemed like if you just spent enough time and just started chugging away on a question and made some good enough guesses and some good enough assumptions, you could get a close enough answer to, if you're very lucky, you'd get the right answer, or at least you get close enough to get a few part marks and wrap up the course. And that there's some, for me, there's some kind of comparison with most of the jobs that I've had as well, where the answer isn't clear, the outcome is like you don't even know if there's an answer, and but just sit down and start powering through and guess, and with a little bit of luck and a little bit of patience and some sweat, hopefully you get part marks at least, and you get to turn the page on to the next exam.
Comforting to hear in some ways for the graduates of this year, and I guess eventually when I graduate as well. Is there anyone else that wanted to comment on that question, or should I move on to the next one?
I'll take a swing as well. I'd say that a huge part of the value I got from U of A had very little to do with the courses itself, but the social aspects and the networking aspects in a very big way. I'm an alumni of a fraternity, Zeta Psi, and over that time I was treasurer, vice president, and you tend to associate like, throw parties, those types of things, but there was a huge amount of like recruiting, finding people, making friends, running clubs and events. And it's like, even when you want to throw a party, it's like, okay, somebody has to get the liquor license. Somebody who's going to be the bouncers? What's the schedule? What's the sign-up sheet? Getting all the flyers out, who's like going around, who's sending out the follow-up calls. And, you need to be managing the budget and how much money can we afford to spend on this? And a lot of those skills, never expected that that would actually basically be what my job is. But you'd be shocked how much similarity there is there. At the same time, those networking skills just became hugely valuable. And I'm not talking just within the fraternity, obviously. It's like you learn to talk to the professors and build a connection, and you develop a Rolodex. But that Rolodex comes in very helpful. Like our first mentors for the business was an alumni of the fraternity. My first employee was one of the students who I met through the fraternity. Our very first customer, a friend of mine, or one of my fraternity brothers, worked at his business and was able to introduce me to his boss. So I think that I built a very wide network of people, and then I was able to, and not just building the network, but learning how to talk to people. I wouldn't say I entered university with that skill at all. I only barely have it now, but I have it enough to get my job done. But learning how to meet people, make connections, and then reach out and help, get the help you need from the right people at the right times is a hugely valuable skill in life, and one that is probably not emphasized as much as it should be.
Awesome. I think that's some very universal advice that will pertain to every student, no matter their career path. So maybe we'll just go on to the next question. Just a quick one. Is there anything in particular that you would have changed about your time spent at the U of A? I guess, what would that be? If no one has an answer, that's okay as well.
Not something I'd exactly change, but I'm shocked how the courses that I understood the least about how they'd apply in the real world, I end up using the most.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think again, I'm speaking to what the program was like 15 years ago. Maybe they do a much better job now of explaining why they're teaching this and why it's applicable. But everything from the linear algebra to accounting for engineers, it's go and grab that textbook. That actually is comes up more frequently than you'd expect, but I never understood at the time. How to set up automated tests felt like such a waste of time. I'd rather be building things, but real world, that's really important. So yeah, I wish I appreciated why they were teaching me some of the things. I would have taken it more seriously, some of those courses.
Yeah, and I would maybe add on to that a little bit, and I would say maybe I would have focused a little bit more on the cross-discipline classes, as while I was in university, tended to focus only on being, electrical engineer, getting into controls and stuff, and that was just going to be my focus. And now I deal with manufacturing engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, controls engineers, and it's on a whole wide variety of stuff. And I mean, I've had to deal with crazy, chemistry related stuff in my previous jobs, thermodynamics all the time, things that I didn't really necessarily think, okay, I took these classes, didn't think it was a focus, but then I think it was still important though that, had that exposure to it because it did help to get that base understanding. And I think the number one thing I got from university was I learned how to learn, and that carries forward to every single, challenge I've taken on.
Awesome. Would anyone else like to take a question, or should we move on?
Maybe kind of tying the two of them together, I think it's hard to really say what would change, because in retrospect, I don't really know how much I remember from any of the individual classes. So what if I had taken a different class? Would I even remember it? I don't know. But the kind of key thing that I think that needs to be taken away is that you shouldn't view a new subject as something scary. You come in, you don't know anything about it. At first you hear some very abstract ideas about it. Maybe it seems incredibly complicated. When you sit down, it's all written by other people. The level of communication is not really so much harder than anything else. And if you keep at it, you discover that these incredibly complex things, anyone can kind of understand them. It's not so hard. And if you just keep plugging away and you aren't afraid to kind of take on new areas or look at new knowledge, even if you're not familiar with it, you can progress a lot, and you can make meaningful contributions to different areas.
To at this point remind everyone that's viewing this panel that we would love for you to drop your questions in the chat, and Annette will bring those up to us as the session progresses. But I'll continue on for now with some questions now that we kind of have a background of our panelists. So my next question is, this might be better if I aim the question at someone in advance. So I was thinking Todd would be very suited to ask this question. I read in your bio that you had a piece of advice to the students in that section, I guess, that there isn't one right career path or one right path in life. And so I think this question kind of speaks to that. And Prashant and Darren, feel free to also address this question after if you'd like. I just feel like it would be fitting. So describe what your first job after graduation was like, and how long did you look for it? How do you overcome the fear of picking the wrong job after graduation?
Yeah, I was lucky in 2006 and 7 and a teensy bit, I think, of 2008. You couldn't not get a job. So not to say that I wasn't qualified. I'm sure I was, I passed the interviews, 3 of them. My first job was for a contracting company, a construction company, a huge, sophisticated international contracting company. But I started that basically right after school. I was thankfully I took a month off before jumping into the world of work, where you get 2 or 3 weeks vacation for the rest of your career. So I was glad I took that time off. But yeah, working as what they called a field engineer, and that job taught lots of things to me. One of the lessons was that a job title doesn't necessarily mean the job description, or even tied to your degree necessarily. I was one of the lucky field engineers that had work in the electrical department and was on site in Fort McMurray, and I saw these mega projects getting built, and was reasonably personable with the craft of the trades that were working there as well, and they were able to kind of take me under their wing. And I think most of my technical knowledge I got in those first 2 years of just being on site in a construction project. So I didn't really have to look for it. I mean, I think one of those early career fairs, like November or something like that, I'd met the recruiters. I was kind of foot in the door from that point on, and then basically within 12 months, I was working full time there. So what was the second part about a fear of choosing?
Just that common for people to fear that they're going to choose the wrong job after graduation. It's going to kind of set the course for the rest of their life.
Yeah, totally. And it feels that way. It's easy for me to look back and, like, in a bio for a program like this, type out and say something like, oh, there's not one career path or one life path. Like, super easy to say in hindsight. But I remember specifically when I got to site in Fort McMurray for this company, within like 5 days, I knew it wasn't the job for me. But I heard this voice in my head that said, like, oh, you've never quit anything, don't quit now. And, like, obviously that doesn't make any sense. That was my first full-time job, but that's what I told myself. And I was, like, looking back, not thrilled with it. I learned a ton, and I'm happy I learned as much as I did. And I made a couple great friends to this day that I'm still in touch with. And so I'm thankful for a ton of things. But man, that job, like, had I known what I knew now, I probably wouldn't have stuck around in it. So I can see that it, like, yeah, it was, whether it was not having the courage or not recognizing that I was in a job that I wasn't pumped about. But it's not an easy, there's no easy answer, at least for me. I'm not the guy that'll give an easy answer to that part. Yeah, things might feel uncomfortable. You may not get your first slam dunk job, your forever job, or your 10-year career job. Like it might take a few to discover what you like and what you're good at and the things you take to heart and find something that lines up with your values. Yeah.
Awesome. So Darren or Prashant, feel free to weigh in on this if you'd like.
Yeah. I guess, for me, as far as like finding my first job, actually, I'll be honest, they found me. And a lot of that was because of the work that I was doing actually at the time with the Autonomous Robotic Vehicle Project. I had several web pages up at that time, kind of posted some of the technical work I was doing. And this engineering consulting company in Seattle was needing somebody with that experience on that particular processor platform, and contacted me. And I had other opportunities, but I was like, this is cool. Let me go work on robots. And, I took the job, but, I think one of the things about it is obviously, moving down to Seattle, just fresh out of school and, trying to establish myself and kind of figure out where I was going, what I was doing. I mean, I was like the young guy in the engineering company by about 20 years. So kind of establishing myself, learning, good work habits, learning like a lot of the unknowns that you just don't know. But also, one of the things I got out of that is that, sometimes, the company stability is out of your hands, and that sometimes you just have to adapt. And, I was there for about a year and ended up, taking another job out to Illinois to go work for Caterpillar, just because the stability wasn't there. And, I was working 80 hours one week, and then the next week I had 20 hours of work to do. And it's a challenge, but I got to say those first few years were definitely formative in my career. You just learn to adapt, and you kind of get like a lot of just be willing to dig in and just figure out different things, and it'll reward you down the line. And I don't think it's just one direct line for a career. It's about, taking your experiences, focusing on what you really want to do and what you find value in, and expanding on that. It seems a little cliche, but I think it's very relevant.
Prashant, would you like to?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I echo a lot of what both Darren and Todd want to say, but maybe as a more recent grad or from graduate school, I wanted to talk more specifically about the fear of the unknown of taking a job. And, there's always this imposter syndrome kind of, do I belong here? Is the job right for me? Am I right for the job? And I actually had that throughout grad school as well. So it's not just particularly related to industry. One thing you realize about that is, in my experience and talking to other people, jobs tend to be fairly flexible in terms of what you can do there, depending on the level that you. So if you find that you're there and you're not particularly enjoying what you do, people there will always take to new ideas. So if you want to do something a different way, or you want to take things in another direction, or maybe switch roles within the company that you're at, that's always a particular option. I've seen that happen a lot at where I work. Where a lot of people, I've seen people move around a lot. So there are ways to mitigate that uncertainty and to find your fit. And of course, it's easier if you were to go to a much larger company than if you were to go to a smaller one. But even the smaller one, maybe you need to be a bit more of a jack of all trades, and you can find your niche more easily then. So there's a lot of uncertainty, but there's ways to circumvent that uncertainty too. And I think that experience, regardless, is a good thing for whatever you do next, whether you liked it or not. So I think that's the main takeaway. I would.
Like everyone's in agreement that it's definitely a learning process and part of the experience. So I see a few questions in the chat now, but I was just going to follow up with Darren and maybe with Sean and Prashant, because I know that you all are doing work, or depends what you want to call it, but you're in the US. So I wanted to know, what was the process of starting work like in the US?
Okay. So I guess as a Canadian citizen, it's not that difficult to get a work visa in the U.S. There is this visa class that is called TN, and it used to be actually only good for a year at a time, but it was infinitely renewable. It's now changed actually to be 3 years at a time, and so effectively, if you have a job offer and a degree related to the job and $50, and you basically go to the border and then you basically get a visa issued. Now, the caveat of that is that it is not permanent residence. So if you don't have a job, you have to move back within 2 weeks. But all in all, it does give engineers a lot of flexibility with that. And because I can tell you as an engineering manager, looking at, foreign national engineers coming into the U.S., that can be burdensome, because the other path for getting into employment in the United States is what they call the H-1B visa path, and with that, it's a lot more involved, and there's a lot of stuff like you have to show that you're not taking away jobs from other American engineers and all this other stuff. So it's a bit of a challenge. You can get through it, especially if you're in an area that really needs your specific skill set. But overall, getting in the door via the NAFTA visa, the TN, I forget what it's called now, but that was my doorway in. And then actually long term, I got my green card in the U.S. Through Caterpillar, but basically it was easier for me because I worked for the company overseas for 3 years in Australia, and then came back, and then they processed me. So they didn't have to do a lot of the labor-related certification. I know that's a little bit of a long-winded answer, and anybody would like to know anything about immigration in the United States, I probably know more than most immigration lawyers on this. So, feel free to drop me a message. I can give you some guidance and some tips in that way, because the thing is it's an area that not everybody knows a lot about, and it can be pretty painful. And I mean, I can tell you from my own experience, I've had my record flagged for no reason, and just had to, just have to go to the secondary screening room and, get questioned on stuff. And I'm like, hey, I'm just a nerd trying to work here. So, it's, there's some challenges for sure.
Yes, so I'm actually in the U.S. on a TN, and I got one recently, and it's through Intel, because it is such a big company. They have their lawyers, and they actually have a whole system to hire internationals, and especially from Canada, which, as Darren was saying, with the TN is actually one of the easier countries to hire from for the U.S. So if you were to go for a large company, they'll definitely help you out. I interviewed before there was any, I didn't have to do anything beforehand, for example. They went through the interview process, and once they decided that, okay, maybe they want to hire me, that's when that process started, and then they were able to help me out quite a bit. So, and then once you're here, you are tied to the job in a sense. I think Darren had mentioned this too. So your TN is tied to your job until you eventually get a green card. But then you are still open to, getting another TN. There's no limit to the amount of TNs you can get. You can get a TN with another company and interview at another position, and so that is also a possibility.
I don't know really how much more I have to add, because I'm also in the TN, and I also found it incredibly easy to get. It's really not a hurdle. I guess the only things I could add are, one, a lot of US companies don't really seem to be aware of exactly how easy it is for Canadians to come through a TN visa. And so they may be kind of a little bit hesitant about it at first, until they kind of understand that they own you, and it's just, they need to send a little message to the border, and then they can come in. It's really very easy for the American companies. if you don't have access to a TN, in a way, it's not a really great visa because you don't build up. Not only do you not get a permanent residency, you don't build up time towards it. So you need kind of like, if you really want to go long term, you need some other kind of visa. As far as I understand it, like a TN visa is just you're not working towards citizenship in the United States. You're more of a visitor, but it's fine for work if that's all you want to do to get started, and it's quite easy to get. The H-1B I know has been incredibly competitive in the last few years. Part of that was the current administration, so hopefully that will be something that becomes easier as we go into a switch.
Awesome. I'm sure that's very useful information to work in the US. Sean, do you want to just briefly maybe tell us how you ended up at Princeton and specifically?
Sure. So when I finished my PhD, I kind of knew I wanted to continue in academics. So I'd just been doing academics a long time. I like it. I like the style of work. So I kind of knew it was for me. And I just started sending out emails. I had my prof, follow up on some emails to other people, but actually my position at Princeton, I just kind of randomly emailed the professor. These guys will occasionally respond to random emails. Maybe it takes them a couple of weeks to get back to you, but yeah, I didn't really do anything special. I came with a proposition, I guess. I'm not just asking for a job. I went with the email saying that we would apply jointly for a scholarship to the Canadian government, and that seemed to attract quite a bit of attention. So I said, I had previously won some awards that were similar, and I think, we could get funding for this. Professors are interested in free work. They always have been. They always will be. So if you can reasonably say there's a good chance you can get me for a cost that's not so high, most professors are somewhat interested. And so yeah, I guess it was kind of lucky, but I think if you just you play the odds, it's every chance is 1 in a million, but if you do it a million times, you expect that one will hit. So
awesome. And then maybe between you and Prashant, I'm just pulling this question from the chat. I'm sure you can read it as well. Maybe you have read it already, but it's from Kai. She's a second year electrical engineering nano student, and she's wondering about research opportunities. Specifically, what is the best way to seek for and land research positions? Is it through job postings and resources from the university, or directly connecting with profs, or something else entirely?
So my experience is that it's the best is to connect through profs, especially as an undergrad. Maybe this is not what you want to hear, but it's difficult to find projects for undergrads that are very meaningful to get started. And so it's best to stay local and just find something you're interested in. More than anything, an undergraduate research opportunity is going to be like kind of an extended study in some topic. So you're going to be more or less doing kind of like almost independent learning within a topic more than you are going to be answering a research question. If you're kind of looking for academic research, maybe if it's more applied, that's different, and I'm not qualified to speak about that. But again, as a undergrad student, you're kind of going to work for free for the profs, so they're very interested in having you come to them, learn in your lab. It's good for them, it's good for you. So my advice would just be, if you have a class that you liked, if you found something interested, go that route, send emails, go talk to the guy. I guess maybe you can't do that right now, but send him an email, have a video chat, see if it seems to be a good connection, and just continue working that way. Most people are quite open to these kind of possibilities, and it's not something you really have to work that hard for in most cases.
Yeah, and the question is from a second year student, correct? Is that right? Yeah. So I would everything Sean said is obviously completely accurate. As in second year, I think it is a bit tougher. I think as you go on to third and fourth year, you get those longer form projects. You find more specific subjects and something like Sean said that you're interested in, and you can delve into it a bit more, or talk to that prof more specifically if they have a special project for you. Or you need to show an interest outside of what maybe is just being done in the course, if you want to go in the research direction. I think that's more possible once you're in your third and your fourth year. As an example, for me in my fourth year, I was interested. I hadn't really done much optics. I started doing a lot more optics in fourth year. I realized that I liked it. And then that's what drove me to my decision to go into grad school in optics in the end. So it wasn't until fourth year that I even knew I wanted to do it. So second year, no rush, but good to start thinking about, diversifying your courses if you haven't found anything you're interested in, if grad school is a path you want to take.
Nicely transitions into the next question. So the question's from William, and he's asking, how do you know whether you will like a field or industry before entering it? And I think we can throw this to anyone on the panel. Just jump in if you'd like to add your...
I'd say attending things like this, talk to as many people in the different fields as you can. And you can't learn in a book what you're going to like, but talking to a lot of people doing the job, you'll usually get a good sense of the real world, what it's like. Also, co-op programs, internships, like there's no substitute for real world experience. And those are really good programs because you can test it out for 4 months and it makes your resume, your CV look better versus once you graduate, a 4-month stint somewhere and then leaving. Maybe you're doing it one time, you can talk yourself out of, but if you have a couple of those on your resume, that starts to be a real bad look for future employers. So I think take advantage of your summers to get some of that real world experience is really key. Also, just from the last question, I will tack on, professors have told me, I don't know if it's true or not, obviously they're telling me what I want to hear, but that they really value real world experience when picking students for like their master's and PhD programs. A number of my former coworkers have gone back to PhD programs, and I always write them nice glowing reference letters, and it seems to work very well. The fact that they've gone out, got a few years of real world experience, and now can bring that back into the lab. So I'll add my 2 cents onto the last question also. Of course, I'm very biased, and they're going to tell me what I want to hear. So take it for what it's worth.
I would say I've worked with a couple older students, and in my experience, what's best is that they have developed a curiosity for some certain questions, that they've gone out and they've seen why certain things are interesting and why they need to be solved. And when they come back, they have a lot of motivation. And if you're just entering grad school kind of like without motivation, you just want to do it, you're not really interested in anything, it's just something to do, then you're going to spin your wheels for a while. You might eventually find something good, but it's really a curiosity driven thing.
Todd, would you like to add
maybe
something
just
on
to
that?
add in, like that question could be topical, or it could be a million miles deep for philosophy or something like that. Like I would say that there's some probability number assigned to whether you like your job or the industry, or whether you're about to make the right choice. And so be okay with, or be ready for this this outcome that you might not like it, and that doesn't mean you sort of, in my view anyways, it doesn't mean that you screwed up and you made a wrong choice. It just means that you discovered one more thing that you thought you'd like, and for whatever reason you discovered, hey, I don't like it for reason number 1, 2, 3, and then hopefully you have a chance to change it, and then find something that doesn't have those reasons in it in your next industry or job or something like that. Like there's still a probability that you'll be into a thing that you turn out not to like, and that can be okay too if you do something about it.
Awesome. I might, Darren, it's kind of related, but I'm just wondering if there was a project or a position that was especially memorable to you, because it seems like you've held a lot of jobs, and so I'm just wondering if it was something that was progressive and you keep finding jobs that you're better suited for and more passionate about, or if there's a particular one you like the most.
That's a tough question. I've liked a lot of the different positions I've been exposed to for a variety of different reasons. I would say actually just for my own like personal and professional growth, my 3 years living in Australia and covering the whole Asia Pacific region and just getting experience working with a bunch of different companies all over the world there. And, you know, going from, you know, sitting in a locomotive factory in Indonesia to working on a salt harvesting machine in Western Australia, you kind of got a different perspective of the different things that can go on. And then you get a little bit idea of like, okay, all problems are the same. You just got to break them down and you'll get to the answer. And so I think for that, it was like, you know, it was great for that kind of experience. Also, you know, spending a lot of time in like, you know, obscure places in China and being like, you know, walking down the street with my colleagues and being like the only foreign person there and everyone's stopping and staring at you and like the language barriers and stuff like that. But then once you kind of got into the technical side of things, you know, it was the same language. So that's a lot of what I lean on. I mean, it's, I guess, you know, I've also like learned a lot about that for myself. I don't fit in a, you know, cookie cutter type organization. I find that I'm really driven by being in an innovative environment where I can go and kind of drive the change. So, you know, I did work for a large Fortune 500 company for a long time, but my longevity there was really more of finding the little pockets of innovation and entrepreneurship that I could dig into. So, yeah, no, and obviously, yeah, it's given me opportunities to get in a bunch of different industries, and every place has got its challenge. I hope that answers that well.
An awesome adventure. So I'm sure, I know I would be very glad to have some sort of career opportunity like that come up. I don't know if I'm going in any particular order anymore, but there's another question, and this one's kind of about how do you find your job without experience, specifically for those that did not do co-op. What should someone with no experience do to get their first job? What are good ways to add experience to your resume? Again, directed at no one in specific, but feel free to.
I guess I can, you know, attest to this just based off of like recent internships that I've hired people from. I actually, you know, one of the biggest things that happens for me that where it works really well is someone like cold calls me, and out of the blue, I get this email from this engineering student at whatever university, and they go, "Wow, I'm really interested in your company because of this, and this. Would you be willing to chat with me?" And myself, I go, "Wow, that takes a lot of gusto to come out and just throw yourself out there." And then you see that really shows that, you know, that self-motivation and that willingness to kind of dig in, and then it translates to their work ethic. So I found a lot of luck with that. And other than, you know, sometimes when you're trying to hire an intern or a junior engineer in an organization, and you just kind of get people that are like, "Yeah, I do engineering." Yeah, you know, people have to sense your passion. They have to sense motivation. If you express that and you can show that, you're gonna get on the top of the heap compared to other people, because I can tell you from experience that not everybody does
that. I'd agree with Darren 100% that like the passion and the energy that people bring to their first job is like one of the defining characteristics, and like really putting yourself out there, willingness to learn, excitement for you know, the job that you're applying for. For anybody who's in computer engineering specifically, there's also, fortunately, open source projects. So I think it's sort of the streams of one of the more unique ones where you can really like go and contribute to very big, very real projects that are getting used all over the place. And it doesn't have to be big fancy things out of the gate. Again, just like what Darren was saying, it's more the energy that you're trying is more important than exactly what you've done. Like, go fix tests, add comments, help them write their documentation. It doesn't matter. Just like find things and go out there and do them to show that you're taking this, like the space, more seriously than all the other students with the exact same degree who are applying. And I think that's a really easy way to do it. Also, I sort of mentioned reaching out to people in the field. So if you reach out to a bunch of people at a company and grab coffee with each one of them and get to know them a little bit, usually they'll that speaks to the character. So then when it's time for your interview, you're already a known entity for that. You're very passionate, you're very engaged. So it's a lot of these students that we hire have those types of extracurriculars, we'll say.
I have a kind of a follow-up to that. Another question from the chat. What are your thoughts on taking some time for professional development for people switching industries and fields? How would you recommend someone do this? And do you have any examples of someone who went from an electrical field to computer and tech? Do you anyone personally, or I guess yourself individually?
Well, I would say for professional development in general, I'm a huge proponent of that. Like, to me, the phrase that's maybe said a million times is, lifelong learning or something like that, which for the longest time for me made me not want to lifelong learn. But finding ways to get, whether it's formal professional development or learning on your own, or like a book from the library. I remember a new grad that I had hired once had he was looking for more responsibility than he had that I could give at the time. There wasn't enough to go around, and he got some drafting books from the library and was just like these big 700-page AutoCAD manuals, and was just flipping through it on like lunch breaks and end of the day before driving home. And an example like that, plus 1,000 other examples of just finding a chance to keep learning, and whether or not you have a job that will teach you on the fly, or whether there's structured training from the employer or structured from an industry group. Just find a chance to like teach yourself something, and there's more and more ways to make it easier. Or there's more and more ways that it's easy for you to teach yourself, and it all makes it easier to transition or to switch gears or switch jobs whenever you feel like the time is right.
Some answer to that question. Does anyone else something they want to add?
I guess the only other thing I would add to it is that, depending on where you are company-wise, I mean, there's usually multiple disciplines of engineering going on there. And I can tell you, as being the guy sitting in the boss seat, that if anybody comes up to me and like wants to learn something different, I'm like, great, let's do it. I'm never going to say no to learning. And it may be that, hey, we can't afford this particular, outside class that you want to go to, or whatever. But hey, maybe it's showing that motivation, getting in there, trying a few things. And then actually, if you demonstrate that you're really serious about digging in and learning outside of what your core discipline is, yeah, then, when I go talk to executive management, I can go and say, hey, that guy over there, or that girl over there, they're really motivated. Let's go and get it on this. Because, if we don't keep on keeping them interested, we're not going to retain. And so I think the one thing too, that a lot of people don't realize, that it's It's not just you're begging to be at the employer. It's also the employer is wanting to retain you. So always keep in mind what your value is and always know what it is. Don't be cocky, but know what your value is and be confident in it, because it will help you in your career.
Awesome. I'm going to switch gears a bit here. I'm curious for Forrest and Todd, what did you envision your working life would look like after graduating? I guess more specifically, did you guys both kind of have the idea of entrepreneurship in the back of your head, or was that something that just sort of happened?
All right, I guess I'll take this one first. Both do this sort of polite Canadian wait for the other person to start. Yeah, it's never in a million years would I have expected this to be my life. Actually, through university, I was playing Sean's path. I was going to be an academic, loved machine learning research, had already been accepted into a master's program. And in my last semester of my undergrad year, came down with a cough, swung by the fantastic university student clinic. They thought I had pneumonia, sent me for some x-rays, found a big tumor in my left lung. And 2 months later, I was under the knife and they removed 3/4 of my lung. Needless to say, I had to drop a few classes, postpone my graduate program. And it was the next year when I was going back to school. We're all very familiar with the complexities of the scheduling your degree. It was 2 classes one semester and 1 class another semester. And it's like, I got to do something with the rest of my time. So got a job. More by accident than anything else. That's a whole separate story. But only once I was actually working, and this was a very small consulting firm. And by small, it's like I was the only developer there. And the president of the company would go out to clients and basically whatever problem they had, oh, we can solve that. And then he'd come back to me. It's like, hey, we just got a job. We need to build a website here. We're fixing their SharePoint there. They're having these hardware issues. Can we go in and fix it? And had to just like figure it out really quickly on our feet. And I wouldn't like say all my solutions were top grade by any stretch, but that rapid fire adrenaline rush of, here's a problem in the morning, come up with a solution by the afternoon. We hear from the client real quick by the evening if you got it right or you got it wrong, and then repeat. And that rapid adrenaline rush of just constant real world problems. I felt I couldn't go back and do like work on a single research problem for multiple years. Right? Like I have a ton of respect for Sean and that approach. That was me in a different life. But the course of that year had sort of changed me. I'd become a bit of an adrenaline junkie for those lots of small, quick problems instead of one big, meaty problem. I guess learn something about myself. Speaking to Todd's point earlier about how there's so many different career paths and you have to just try some. But then I was hooked on solving problems. I wasn't actually trying to be an entrepreneur. And through, again, a long path, I won't get into the details, I found myself as a freelance developer. And freelance developer, for all you students, means that you knock on doors, you find small companies that have problems, you try and convince them that you can solve their problems with technology. And if you're lucky, a few of them will occasionally hire you to do it. You build it. Most of the time, you're just building a website because that's easy to sell, and then moving on to the next thing. And occasionally, you're getting really interesting problems. You also tend to work out coffee shops pretty exclusively. And it's through that process of solving small business problems, coffee shops, I ran into my now business partner, Sam Pillar. And he was also a freelance developer doing this. And we happened to discover a series of, we were just comparing notes. And we recognized he had this idea, and I recognized the same problem in a bunch of my clients, that a bunch of businesses were facing the same challenges. It's like, well, why are we solving these on a one by one basis? We can come up with a more generic solution that could solve it for a lot of them at once. And it turns out that by a lot, there were millions, and that this was a very real problem that, and it turned into a business. So I never set out like, I want to start a business. It's, I want to solve problems. And it turns out that there are problems out there that, you know, if enough people have the same problems, then solving that problem is a business. And sort of under better lucky than smart, I happened to stumble upon the right problem at the right time, and turned into something pretty amazing.
Wow, that sounds like a crazy turn of events, and I hope you and your family are doing well now. But yeah, that's just an amazing story of how you ended up with a very successful company. So that's really incredible. Todd, would you like to speak a bit on your experience with
I guess I should have gone first rather than following like a company that has 100 times more higher valuation and than my you know, and I have never had lung surgery. I sure never thought that I would have it wasn't on my game plan to be to start a business, to be an entrepreneur. I think I even let that word entrepreneur kind of just always got my sort of like skin bristling a little bit too. But it was never on the radar. And when I met the fellow who would eventually become my business partner at the time, we just found we were even then neither of us wanted to instantly start a company, but we were talking about the same problems, the same like bad trends, the same like hiccups. Well, why wasn't this easy? Why wasn't this other thing? There's an easier way to do this other thing. So yeah, I would like Forrest, problem solving is a good a very concise summary. To me it was the idea of trying to make something easier, and it only started to bubble up after working at 3 or 4 different companies and thinking like, well, what the heck, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And if somebody's willing to pay for an easier way to do it, like maybe there's a way for me to get a couple bucks out of it too. On the flip side of that, I could never have or that I never thought I would have done it. I sure couldn't have predicted all of the headaches and endless kicks in the shin that come every single day with starting a business and growing a business, and trying to scale as quick as you can, and get new clients who in the consulting world have a choice of dozens of other consultants that are established, that have decades of history, that have principals who have been their maybe friends from university or business partners for years, people that they've worked with for decades, and then some new fresh face comes along saying, hey, come work with us, I started a new company, or we started this company together, we swear we'll make it easy for you. And that's an understatement to say that's a hard sell. Now I think we obviously did a good job, and we attracted a lot of top-notch talent and great projects and great customers, but man, like I couldn't have guessed all of the headaches that just when you least expect it pop up along the way.
Now, just what the biggest challenge was in having a startup and pursuing that once you had the idea.
Oof, they're the biggest. I don't know. There's about 1,000 tied for first place. The one that kept the variation on a theme that kept coming up was that there was never a steady state. Like I'm thinking, like there's some controls class I remember taking in school, and it has the steady state control curve of damper effect, something like that. That doesn't exist. At least it didn't for us. And in business, and there was always the teeter totter between too much work and not enough horsepower, not enough staff available, not enough hours available to work on a project, or the opposite, where there's suddenly too many staff, not enough projects, and the hunt is on. There was never a steady state, which might have always been the source of a frustration in some form or another.
Yeah, it's similar to Todd. It's like you almost like, you ask somebody who's ever tried running a small business what the biggest problem is, and their brain's going to explode. There's just so much. There's so many ways to answer that, and all of them come with a very painful story. I do think people in general are the hardest thing. It's like, business would be easy except for your customers. Of course, you don't have a business, and management would be easy if it wasn't for your employees. Of course, you wouldn't be a manager. It's when you're working with machines, you go buy 10 computers, they're all going to behave exactly the same. You fix a bug in your code and now it's fixed. Every person's different. And when you fix people problems, they rarely stay fixed forever. So I do think people most of the problems do fit into this broad bucket of people. But boy, those headaches come in so many different ways. And really, like, everything in life is about the people, whether it's your coworkers, your customers, your investors, your competitors. Everything ends up being about the people. So if you're in the business world and you're trying to sort of like navigate all of those and figure out how to tie all of these things together in a way that works well for everybody, it's going to be people that ultimately create the biggest headaches. If we had more time, the stories that we could all share. I'm sure everybody on this panel has good ones.
That's a whole other hop-in seminar another day. Yeah,
maybe you need a beer for that one.
Well, you'll have to let the people that organize this know, and we can go with the panel 2.0. But I'm going to jump to the chat quickly here. Kai asked, what are some skills you learned from your university clubs, engineering or non-engineering related, and these skills also applied to your workplaces?
I could try to answer that one. Not any particular club or class in general, but definitely communication is number one, I think. There's a lot of managers and people who manage people on this panel. I think Darren made a point of, how do you show, or making your value shown, and to do that, it's communication, right? So how do you need to be able to communicate what you know, and that helps other people around you. You need to be able to communicate what you don't know, which I think a lot of people forget, and that helps other people help you, right? And if you're working in any sort of team environment, or which is almost 99% of the time, that helps you move forward, and it helps your value be known, and it becomes very apparent what you're bringing to the table. So, there's a lot of people I've seen with exceptional skill who may not be able to communicate their idea or accept, criticism or feedback. And that, then I think that's very limiting. So, the number one thing I would say I learned was my ability to communicate an idea, or express what I don't know.
And I would agree with that. And obviously, I think you do have a lot of opportunities with university clubs to get exposure to things that you don't necessarily get in just your engineering classes. And that's one that every engineer does need to sell their idea. It's communication, getting people on board to understand what you're doing. And I tell this to my really skilled engineers on my team all the time. I'm like, no one cares that you're the smartest person in the room if you can't explain why you are and what you're doing. And it's like mind-blowing concept to a lot of people, but it's really true. And sometimes the engineer that's able to express and explain things simply, that in a way that it can get processed by upper management, that's the person sometimes that's going to get promoted. They may not be the most technically capable person, but they get promoted because people understand their communication and they understand how to sell an idea, whether or not it's selling for a business or to sell to get budget or all that type of stuff. That it's all important. And I think that's one of those skill sets that you really get from an engineering club. I think also too, one thing I would say just from my own personal experience from, over 20 years ago, starting up in the ARVP club, is that I just remember the first year we went to competition in Detroit, and we got our butts kicked by a bunch of American teams. And you know what it was? Is that they had corporate sponsorship. And our biggest problem was we kept on trying to invent stuff from scratch. And I think that's a skill set that you need to learn, is that sometimes you just need to buy the thing off the shelf and work on stuff that really where your skills are and where your value are. And so, because I think that's kind of the concept you get in university is like, hey, let's go build this up from first principles and figure this out. This is a cool idea. That doesn't make money. That doesn't get projects done. And so I think that's something I learned real quick. I said, holy cow, what are we doing farting around trying to make our own motor driver boards? Let's just get something, right off the shelf, because they've figured out all these other problems that we're going through. So there's no point in reinventing the wheel. And that's something I think you can get from participation in those clubs that you may not directly get just from going to classes.
I do just want to say that, I think Darren just said something so important that I want to double click on it, as us old folk used to do. I get into conversations with students sometimes about the difference between sort of a more junior or entry level engineer and a senior engineer. And none of it has to do with how smart you are or how much technical knowledge you have, right? That's an entry point, but it's the experience, just like what Darren was describing, knowing when to buy things, knowing how little work you can do to solve the problem, knowing how to work together. Those are the things that actually differentiate between junior and senior. When you graduate, you can know every piece of technology there is right now. It's all going to be obsolete in 4 or 5 years anyway. So that doesn't really matter to me. But people, you're still going to have to work with people in 4 or 5 years from now. You're still going to have to make just good judgment decisions for your entire career. And learning that sound judgment is so, so important. And everybody learns it the hard way. But if you're smart and listening to Darren, you'll hopefully only learn it the hard way one time and not have to make that mistake 2, 3, 4 times.
That's very useful advice, and I'll definitely take that to heart. I have a question for Sean now. I was just wondering, at what point did you feel like you were kind of an expert in your field, or have you even reached that point yet?
Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm an expert in the problems that I specifically solve, which is not a field. So I don't know if you can really. A field is a very broad thing, but I think it does. Maybe one more vote of confidence for what Darren said. I have found that with new students, it's a common problem too that you feel like you have to know everything about a research problem before starting to ask questions for yourself, or alternatively, you want to build up absolutely everything about a project, which makes it completely unmanageable. And it's kind of just the same thing. You have to pick and choose what you can tackle, and that's the only way you can ever solve anything or make any progress. So yes, sorry I deviated from the question, but even in research in academia, that it holds true. So yeah, universal thing. I can't say I'm an expert in my field. I have definitely got a lot more confident as I've gone along. And the only way you build confidence is by doing the projects, by being in it. I guess familiarity breeds confidence, I guess. And eventually, maybe you don't know anything, maybe you do, but you feel more comfortable. So I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I think that if you feel uncomfortable, just know that really everyone else doesn't really know so much either. And if you keep working at it for a few years, you'll be like all the rest of us.
Sean's definitely an expert. I'll vouch.
I have a question for you, Prashant. Sorry, these are all kind of unrelated now, but I was wondering more specifically on the topic of your work. What's the most pressing issue for your in your current industry and field?
Issue, competition, I guess. I mean, Intel is a very big company, and again, I guess this comes down to what type of work, size of company, grad school, starting a business, whatever type of work you do. But something specific to a big company, the bottom line becomes very important at a certain point, even when you're in research and development. And so then a lot of focus is put on, what are the competitors doing? How are we different? What can we do? So to answer that question, what is the biggest issue? Yeah, like a specific engineering problem. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, detail about almost kind of what you're working on a little more in detail to give people an idea of what problems you're solving.
Unfortunately I can't do that. Yeah, Intel may shoot me right here if I do. But yeah, unfortunately I can't get into the details. But you can imagine that it's a very complex process, and there's thousands of people working on it. So to make a processor, so we're making the next generation, which is the 7 nanometer. Even within our group, there are thousands of people who are just the data analysts, thousands of people who are just working on a particular chemistry for the types of films they're depositing, thousands of people who are just looking at different materials to improve the performance of the chip. So it's a very, very much a team effort. It's a very, very much an integrated problem. There are multiple things that need to come together to make the thing work. And that's, I think, what makes it the most challenging. How many different fields, in fact, have to come together? And I think that's the most interesting part of my job, is that Intel actually doesn't discriminate in the type of engineer that you are. They hire, they'll hire material science. They'll hire if you did anything in bio. They'll hire anybody if you did something in electrical engineering, obviously, because your experience can actually be quite valuable to the end product because it's such an integrated problem. And I think that's the biggest challenge. Yeah.
I think it's a follow-up. So is semiconductor manufacture capacity super competitive now? I heard Apple booked all 5 nanometer production capacity at TSMC.
That was the answer to my first question about competition being a big problem. Yeah.
So anyways, if anyone else wants to answer that in whatever capacity they want, just kind of the general idea of pressing issues you're working on, obviously as much as you can disclose, and maybe you can even touch on what sort of technical skills are really crucial in your line of work. But if it's a tough question, feel free to also focus on the second part, just about what technical skills are really valuable in your life.
Well, I can say that at least research and academia, the main problem when you dig down to it is usually people are struggling with scale. So we had all these dreams of answering all these questions with computers, but Prashant, Intel, it's just kind of stopped. Like we're not getting the increase, and so we can't solve the problems that we wanted to solve. So now we got to maybe make a quantum algorithm. We don't know if this will work. The problems that people have not solved that are very interesting all have to do with incredibly large systems. And then how do we make approximations to these incredibly large systems? So like, do we do a machine learning algorithm? What does it even mean when we do these neural networks? How do they work? What, is it just kind of data fitting and statistics? Is there something more to it? I don't know. And when you look at all the different optimization that comes into it, because you're looking at large scale challenges, like the optimization theoretic background the perspective of looking at this from like a computer scientist kind of view. Basic knowledge about linear algebra, these are very important technical skills that seem to be consistent across many different disciplines.
Yeah, and I guess I would pile on a little bit with that. And for me, what I see a lot in the industry I'm in, and I've seen it throughout different industries I've been involved with, is that there's always like a big challenge from the crossover from the engineering design or the print to the practical application. And that's definitely a skill set that you can have, is getting out in the field, working on, you know, the physical problem, because sometimes things get engineered in the field and they may not fully understand what the issues are, what the challenges are. Also, too, you can learn a lot from the technicians in the field that you may not have realized, because they see some stuff that's how this stuff goes together, and they may expose a design issue that you didn't count on. But yeah, that would be something that I would say is pretty critical.
Some advice and insight here. We have a few more questions. Oh, sorry, I'm going between chats. I lost it. Okay, Kai asked again, just how useful is high-level programming languages like Python in electrical nanoengineering or semiconductor development?
Somewhat directed at me. Important. There's a lot of people, I guess, let me answer the question. There's a lot of people who I work with that have never coded in their life. And there's a lot of people who are absolute experts at coding. And when they bring that experience, it's like a very, very valuable skill. I'll put it that way. I think in any industry, not just, you know, it's particular to semiconductors. But not to say that you absolutely need it, but if you have it, it is definitely valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually I can pile on to this from when I was working on semiconductor processing equipment. We actually developed a subsystem on our equipment to using machine learning libraries in Python to actually predict when major pieces or subsystems in the equipment were about to fail or needed maintenance. So this stuff will show up in various forms out there, and it's a skill set that's very valuable.
I think more and more every company is becoming a data company. It's just you apply the data in different ways, but you're a data company, and the high-level languages like Python, Ruby are like, those are really useful for rapidly throwing together ways of crunching the numbers and like turning that data into value for the business. So doesn't matter what your career is, those are already valuable and will just become more and more so.
Switching gears here again from another question from the chat. This one's for Sean. Did you ever think about doing a graduate degree in another country? Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, I would have done a graduate degree in another country, and I actually think it's a pretty good idea if you don't have a professor in mind. So I met the professor that I worked with, Zubin, as part of my final year project, and we just had a really good relationship. I knew I could work with him. I was interested in the work he was doing, and I knew that I would learn a lot from him, and I was really excited about working for him, so that's why I continued doing it. But all things equal, I would say that getting a different perspective, moving somewhere else, probably this is beneficial. And especially if you can move around to a setting that's different, it'll be challenging for you, but ultimately probably good. And you establish a second set of connections. So the process for going to the US or for going to some other English-speaking country is generally quite easy. I don't know the specific details about what you have to do other than usually you have to write some kind of introductory level tests, and then hopefully you get through the admissions process. I think it's a good idea. I don't know enough about it to really speak intelligently about it, though. I would have pursued this had I not been interested in what I was already doing.
To add to that, Sean, there are ways you can do exchanges. Like Sean was in Germany for how long was it? You were there for a year? Can't remember
Yeah, I was in Germany for a year. I guess where you start doesn't necessarily have to be where you finish, and there will be these kind of opportunities too. Yeah, so there's a lot of room in academics for moving around, and your professor probably knows other professors in other countries who are working on similar things. So if you're interested in that and you do want to stay close to home, there's a chance you will be able to travel. But again, I think that yeah, it's a good idea if you're serious about pursuing it.
Awesome. I now have I know that Todd and Darren, you have both worked in consulting, and for those of us that may not be familiar with engineering consulting, can you tell us more what that job really looks like?
I guess I can start, and then Todd can fill in. I can tell with a smile there, he's excited about this. Yeah, I mean, I think the challenge with consulting is that sometimes customers really suck, and it's something that you just gotta kind of get over it. And I think in like a larger organization, you somewhat get shielded as an engineer, and you kind of go, if you're working with another group and they're difficult, you can kind of brush it over because you're all working for the same place. When we're dealing directly with customers, and your interface with that customer is going to directly affect the financials of the company that you work for, it becomes a pretty, a bit of a tight wire to balance on. But yeah, I don't know. The one thing I think my time working in the consulting side is that, one, you find that you're always kind of selling your company, and you're always trying to find new opportunities. And you may feel initially like that's not your job, but eventually you figure out that, hey, if I go out and I go and convince this customer to go do another project with us, I'm going to probably get the work, and I'm going to continue working on the cool stuff that I'm liking to work on. So rather than if I don't speak up when I'm working on something and maybe suggest that this is something that we could help further with, that work may go away, and I may not have opportunities for work, and it may translate to you not having hours. So it's a different mindset, and I think it makes you a lot more humble, and definitely in other organizations, I'm a lot more conscious of what the time and money I spend on a project and what it translates to the bottom line. And not everybody gets that until you've suffered through consulting.
Totally, yeah. I think one of the first lines I was using it at career fairs when we would be recruiting for summer or new grads was that like a consulting engineer, it's kind of when the stereotypical putting an idea on paper or creating those standard construction drawings that first come to mind when people think of building stuff. And I think, yeah, that to be a consultant with that maximum sales mode kind of all the time, it sort of shows the scale of what a consulting firm is like. I think a lot of folks, or a lot of students, probably have seen the CEA, is Consulting Engineers of Alberta. I think there may even be, I don't know if there's a student group, but I know they used to have a active group on campus or with the faculty. So it's the scale of those companies, like I think Stantec's in there, but most of them are like less than 100 people and maybe less than 50 people. And most of the folks that work for a consulting company kind of see like start to finish, including like the lead generation, like locking specific projects down with a proposal, the conceptual design, drafting, all the way support during construction when hiccups and surprises pop up, during the construction phase. Like that's kind of this like whole life cycle thing in consulting, and all along the way, it's yeah, it's competitive. So you're selling not just, you know, a person wanting to build multifamily property or an office building or a water treatment plant. You're competing against, you know, the 50 member firms of, or 100 member firms of the CEA, plus, you know, everyone who's not part of an industry association like the CEA, and you're selling, you know, not just the technical solution, putting ink on paper or CAD on paper. You're selling the team. Does the team make it easy? Does the team make it fun, enjoyable? And then fee comes into there too, and there's the dangerous race to the bottom of who's cheapest, because there's still a prevailing thought that if you just spend less money, you'll get a good project out of it, or faster, or something like that. Like that philosophy still floats around every now and then. It's yeah, it's a heck of an industry. I liked it. Obviously, I stuck around and started a business in it. But it's anyways, the punchline is it's kind of putting ideas on paper and selling the paper or the service of creating that.
Thank you for. I'm sure that's a very valuable experience to have as a professional engineer. We have a few more questions on the list and only 10 more minutes, so feel free to just kind of rapid fire these questions to an extent. So we actually have a first year joining us, and they're asking, how did you know which discipline you wanted to study while you were in your undergrad, I assume? So anyone?
The right answer is it's the discipline you're most interested in, and you'll probably know the discipline you're most interested in when you try it. It's really like people excel when they're interested and they're curious, and they want to learn what they're being taught. And if not, they don't. So you just have to find you know, what classes you're good at. That's a good guide. That's usually shows you kind of intrinsically what you're interested in. And more than that, you just have to kind of, more than anything, more than like where you think the job will go, I would follow what classes I think are interesting, and what kind of knowledge I think is interesting.
Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Yeah, for me, it was as simple as I liked, you know, stuff like computers. I liked tinkering with things. I liked hands-on hobby stuff, the idea of robots, that sort of thing. But sorry, Forrest, but the computer engineering was too nerdy for me. So I was like, well, I'll stick with electrical. It's a breath away. That'll be good. And luckily it lined up well enough with my interests.
I think what Sean said about, you know, you know it when you see it. It's the old cliche, like falling in love. You know, if you're not sure if you've ever been in love, you haven't been in love. If you haven't found that thing that just gets your heart beating, where, you know, you get home from classes and you pull out your computer or your textbook or whatever, and you just keep doing it because it's actually fun, you probably want to keep trying. But you can't predict in advance. You have to just like actually go out and try a lot of things, sign up for the classes. I think that's one of the best parts about first year, second year. It's you're early enough in your journey that you can just try a lot of things, sort of judgment free, much like the co-op program, right? This is this phase in your life, in your career, where like you're encouraged to go out and try a little bit of a lot of different things. So embrace that, and you know, just keep trying things until you find that thing that you just know it's the right thing for you. Of course, again, it's easy for us to say that we've all found it, but yeah.
Well,
I guess all students listening should also be aware of something called survivorship bias. You know, there could be 99 people that did things like exactly like me, and they all were horrendous failures. And I'm the guy who won the lottery, who now gets to write the book about how to win the lottery. It's a very common thing at panels that the people up here talking, we don't know any more than you do. We can share our experiences, but take it with a huge, huge grain of salt.
That question was from Cameron,
cool.
so I hope. Oh, sorry. That question came from Cameron, so I hope that helped. But yeah, I'm sure it is a testament, though, that you're all sitting here very happy with where you've ended up so far, and very successful, might I add. So I'm sure that will encourage Cameron to try a few things out. So I just wanted to quickly ask Sean and Prashant if you had like an elevator pitch, some people call it, as to why grad school. I don't know if you have something like that. Just what would you, how would you sell grad school to people?
Do you want to go first, Prashant?
Sure.
Okay.
It's an elevator pitch. I think Sean actually kind of hit the nail on the head quite early. Grad school is a very self-motivated endeavor. So you have to be curious about what you're doing, and you have to want to do it. That doesn't mean right at the start there's a lot of uncertainty. That's how I felt. It may not be the same for everybody. I ended up sticking with it, and it ended up being a great choice in the end. But I think from that, I did learn that you do really want to do it. And it's a very self-motivated thing. And I think there was a question about, how do I get into grad school, or, what do I do? And again, it's when you see it, you know it. Again, like Forrest was saying, like I started doing optics in 4th year. I really started enjoying it. I got more involved with the professor, started doing a bit more research. And then that kind of naturally got me into looking for professors in and around different universities, emailing, and an opportunity came up, and I took it. A little bit of a leap of faith, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm not answering this the best way, but I guess I'm kind of going through my thought process when I first decided to do grad school. And then through grad school itself, I did learn what I'm saying now. So it's not like I knew this when I started. So I don't know, Sean, anything more specific to add there?
Okay, so my elevator pitch is that grad school gives you the opportunity to do self-development that would otherwise be extremely difficult. It's not that you can't do the kind of self-development and learning other skills, or kind of going really deep into some research area with a company. But generally, if you're working for a company, it's because they want some kind of product out of you. You're expected to turn things in on time. You're expected to do some kind of work. And this means a balance of your limited resource of energy. In grad school, you have a very open-ended problem. Your professor probably doesn't really expect anything out of you for the first couple years. You just have to complete some courses. How well you do in these courses is really not that important in the long term, even less important than what you do in your undergrad. So you have the opportunity to develop yourself into some branch of knowledge that is deep and requires a high level of commitment. You can take the time to do this that is otherwise extremely difficult to find. And that kind of opportunity for self-development is pretty rare. You will set yourself back in terms of real world experience from other people, but I think it's kind of viewed as more and more of a positive thing among many big companies. So just because you went to graduate school, it doesn't mean, you can't do the same job you could do when you came out of undergraduate. Yeah, chances are you can do it. It's fine. And you just have to keep the expectation that, maybe you're not going to get a better job. I don't think that's necessarily true, but also I don't think that it really sets you back. And ultimately, when you look at the titles in major companies, they've gone to grad school. If you start your own company, obviously that's a different story. But if people are doing hiring for big companies, they like credentials, and this is another credential you can add, and it's not really that painful. It's a nice thing to do. So that's maybe I went a little over time, but that's the elevator pitch.
So elevator ride is fine. I want to just give you guys the chance, if you need to leave right at 7, that's okay. But otherwise, I was going to just give you the choice of 2 questions to kind of wrap it up here. So feel free to step out if you need to, but otherwise I'm gonna give you each about 30 seconds to answer one of the 2 questions that I'm gonna pitch now. So the questions are, what goals do you have for the future of your career? Or what piece of advice do you want to leave with us? So Forrest, go ahead and answer that first if you're ready.
It's a loaded question. Well, I think on a go forward basis, I'm having so much fun doing what we're doing, just figuring out how to solve these small businesses problems. And we're fortunate, like we got hundreds of thousands of customers now, but I'm looking forward to figuring out like, how do we get that to the millions? And I think just, waking up every morning and what are all the problems or what are all the things keeping us from accomplishing that? What's the biggest one that I'm going to try and tackle today? And yeah, you break it down like any other problem, and it's just a lot of fun doing that. So that's I don't know if it's like a career ambition. It's not like I'm going for a bigger title at this point. I just want to see how big of an impact can we have at this point.
I see Todd unmuted himself, so go right ahead.
I would say maybe just answering that second one of what to leave with. I would say there's a huge risk of getting into your job, and maybe it's more than a 9 to 5. Maybe it's like an 8 to 5 or an 8 to 6 with lunches and breaks and plus an hour commute, and you see all your coworkers more than you see your family and friends, and probably have a lot of fun along the way. But there's a huge risk that you not lose touch of the real world or the rest of the world, but that you're not getting all that. I found I was, missing out what's going on around town. I was missing out on other perspectives. You get into like a little echo chamber of me and my coworkers, and for knowledge too. So I would say to go out of your way just to stay alert to what's outside of your company, outside of your career, outside of your industry. Try to learn something every now and then that's outside of that, and maybe you'll be lucky enough to find something else that you like as well.
I'm sure that helps your work as well. Awesome advice. Prashant?
Kind of what Todd was saying. I'll go answer the second question. I would say keep an open. Don't have a set idea of this is going to be my career and this is what I'm going to do. 9 times out of 10, where you end up is not where you ever expected you'd end up anyway. One thing that an undergraduate engineering degree does give you is it shows you have an ability to learn things, right? So there's no rule saying you can't learn something else or apply it to something else. So keep an open mind, try new things, keep learning, and you'll show you're interested, and you'll find what you
like. Darren, would you like to share now?
Sure. So to the first question, I would say my goal is to continue to bring order out of chaos, because that's been my career, and I continue to push that as being my focus. And wherever I end up position wise is where I end up. And also for me, I get a lot of satisfaction out of getting really smart people to be successful and helping them grow. And, I look forward to like working with like motivated individuals that really want to grow and learn different things. And maybe, it may be as simple as needing someone to be an advocate for them so people really understand what their capabilities are, or it's to, maybe learn something new or a new discipline. And I think kind of tying into that relative to, a message for, new grads is that, find mentors out there. You'd be surprised how many people want to really help you. And when you do find somebody that's willing to help you and willing to grow with you and kind of fits your style, you'd be surprised. I've got a whole slew of mentors from my career from different places that I've worked, and I still call them up today and bounce ideas off them. So it's that inadvertent networking that happens from finding people that are like-minded. I can't express that enough.
On the last words.
Okay. Well, they're going to be kind of repetitive. Similar to what Prashant said, I would kind of parrot it and say, trust yourself in retrospect. When you look back at kind of like the fears you have before you start a project or before, you make a decision and you look at it a couple of years later, you say, well, why the hell was I worried about that? Really, it didn't matter. Like, if it succeeds or it fails, I'm still okay. This is not a life or death situation. It's all going to be fine, whether it works out or not. And you just have to see these problems for what they really are. You're in a very good position already. Even if things go badly, you're still in a very good position. So don't be afraid to try new things, and don't be so concerned about failure or the perception that you won't be the best at something. That's really what will hold you back.
So if it's okay, for other people got to answer both questions, so I'm going to sneak in an answer to the second one as well. But Prashant mentioned it earlier, imposter syndrome. I think that's a really important thing for all fresh grads to understand, that no one knows what they're doing. Everybody's faking it. And the moment you're not, the moment you're comfortable, that's when you should be worried. You're not pushing yourself. You're not growing. You're not trying new things. Or, it's you're not moving forward. You're moving backward. And so you should always never try and be the smartest person in the room. Always try and be the dumbest person in the room. That means you're somewhere where you can learn and there's nowhere to go but up. And I think it's really easy early in careers to, fight that instinct, or try and find a spot where, you don't think you're going to fail. But if you can't fail, you can't really succeed either.
Leaving us incredible, such an incredible piece here. I think this is where we'll end the session. Sorry for going over time, but I wanted to extend a big thanks to Sean, Darren, Forrest, Prashant, and Todd for taking time out of their precious evenings to speak with us tonight. And thank you to all the attendees who chose to join this session as well. I'm sure that you can get in contact with all of these people by email or through the Young Alumni Council if you have further questions at some point. But yeah, thank you so much for attending. And I think this is where we will leave the event. So there's not really a way to have a virtual round of applause, but if you want to leave your messages of thanks in the chat, that would be awesome.